case of crime, identity, and justice. In the United States of America, the justice system often becomes a reflection of society's complex morality, biases, and sense of right and wrong. The story of Amber McLaughlin, a convicted murderer, records a moment in history that forces us to examine the tangled intersections of crime, punishment, and identity. On January 3, 2023, McLaughlin became the first openly transgender woman to be executed in the U.S. A grim milestone, her case is a chilling combination of brutal violence and the underlying socio-political debates surrounding the death penalty and LGBTQ+ rights. This documentary delves deep into McLaughlin's life, her heinous crime, and the moral quandaries her story provokes. It is a narrative that confronts the failures of the system to protect victims, a society's thirst for justice, and the challenges faced by marginalized individuals navigating a complex legal framework. At its core, this is not only a story of life and death, but also one of accountability and humanity. Every crime has a victim, and in this tragic case, Beverly Genther's life was violently taken in an act of chilling brutality. Beverly lived a quiet life, cherishing the relationships with friends and family that defined her world. Her life was shattered on November 20, 2003, when her former partner, Scott McLaughlin, later known as Amber, stalked, raped, and stabbed her to death in a crime that shocked her community. Beverly had obtained orders of protection in an attempt to shield herself from Scott's obsessive harassment, but those measures proved insufficient. On that fateful night, Genther was ambushed as she left work. Her body was later found near the offices where she worked, a horrific end to months of stalking and fear. For Beverly's loved ones, the devastation was immediate and profound. This was a life lost far too soon, leaving behind holes in the lives of those who knew her. Beverly's murder prompted a swift investigation. Evidence and a trail of witness testimony firmly pointed to Scott McLaughlin as the perpetrator. Law enforcement uncovered how Beverly had endured months of unbearable harassment. The predatory behavior culminated in a violent and premeditated act of murder. In the trial that followed, the details of the crime emerged in chilling detail. Scott had stalked Beverly obsessively before ending her life in a brutal act that highlighted his dangerous fixation. A jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to death, a verdict that sparked little initial controversy, as the heinousness of the crime was unquestionable. But Scott McLaughlin's story and its implications would evolve in unexpected ways over the next 2 decades. Scott McLaughlin began the transition process and publicly came out as Amber McLaughlin 3 years prior to her execution. Details from her earlier life provided significant context to her actions. Amber was abandoned as a child, moving through foster care and enduring abuse. She struggled deeply with her mental health, highlighted by suicidal ideation and severe depression later in life. Amber's transition while incarcerated opened a new chapter, raising discussions around her identity and how it intersected with her crimes. To some, her gender transition was critical to understanding her journey and the discrimination and struggles she faced within and outside the prison system. Yet to others, it was irrelevant, a distraction from the heinous acts she had committed. The execution of Amber McLaughlin reignited an old and polarizing debate about the death penalty. On one hand, critics of capital punishment questioned whether it was ever an ethical means of justice, particularly in a flawed system rife with social inequities. On the other hand, supporters of McLaughlin's execution argued that justice must be served and her actions warranted the ultimate punishment. Governor Mike Parson's decision to deny clemency drew outrage from some activist groups, especially given Amber's mental health history. The act of executing someone with a deeply troubled past cast doubt on whether the system, by ending her life, was delivering justice or perpetuating cruelty. Yet Beverly Genther's family saw things quite differently. For them, McLaughlin's execution provided a sense of justice and closure, even though no punishment could bring Beverly back. For these loved ones, Amber's identity and struggles were separate from the crime, which remained their focus. For Amber McLaughlin, transitioning was part of a journey to address who she truly was, even behind the bars of death row. Her transition began amidst inadequate support for transgender inmates and in an environment often hostile to LGBTQ+ individuals. Reports of widespread systemic issues, including discrimination, lack of medical care, and abuse toward transgender inmates, are commonplace within the American justice system. Amber's story epitomized the challenges transgender individuals face in carceral settings, serving as a grim reminder that even the pursuit of authenticity can be fraught with hardship behind bars. Her transition became a flashpoint. It underlined not only her search for personal identity, but also society's struggle to humanize someone who committed such unimaginable violence. McLaughlin's execution did not occur in silence. Advocacy groups, including LGBTQ+ organizations and anti-death penalty activists, fought tirelessly in her defense. They filed appeals citing her gender identity, mental health challenges, and troubled upbringing as mitigating factors. Yet the opposition was equally fierce. Many viewed these arguments as insufficient to erase her calculated and violent crime. To critics, the activism seemed to shift the focus from justice for Beverly Guenther and downplayed the trauma McLaughlin inflicted on her victim. The clash underscored a larger societal conversation. Can advocacy for marginalized individuals coexist with the pursuit of justice when the person in question has committed atrocities? Do perpetrators of violent crimes ever regain their humanity in society's eyes? Amber McLaughlin's journey through the legal system shed light on deeper systemic problems. Her case highlighted inequalities faced by those with mental health challenges, gender dysphoria, or histories of trauma. Critics of her sentencing argued that judges and juries often fail to consider these factors holistically. On death row, McLaughlin's struggles with identity mirrored those of an unspoken number of incarcerated transgender individuals, raising questions about how the justice system handles such unique cases. Was McLaughlin's execution consistent with justice, or was it a reflection of how easily marginalized individuals are cast aside in the legal process? Through the many debates, it is critical not to lose sight of the victim, Beverly Guenther. Her life is often overshadowed by the more dramatic aspects of McLaughlin's story, yet she is the reason this case exists. Beverly's family and friends remember a kind, caring woman whose life was brutally taken. For those left behind, the pain and grief remain palpable. The lingering question for them is not about fairness to Amber McLaughlin, but justice for Beverly, justice for the acts of violence that robbed the world of a mother, a sister, and a friend. McLaughlin's execution forces society to grapple with a difficult question. What role should ethics play in criminal punishment? Does her gender identity and troubled past reduce her culpability, or does the severity of her crime demand the ultimate price? Moreover, where does morality lie when the death penalty is so deeply intertwined with systemic inequality, bias, and inefficiency? Amber's story exposes brutal contradictions in a legal system that claims to act in pursuit of justice. At the same time, society must examine its capacity for forgiveness, or lack thereof, who is given a chance at redemption and who is deemed irredeemable. Amber's case challenges us to look not only at her crime, but the circumstances surrounding it and what they reveal about our collective humanity. The story of Amber McLaughlin is one of tragedy and complexity, defined by unthinkable violence, questions of identity, and the harsh decisions of justice. At the center remains a victim, Beverly Guenther, whose life was brutally stolen, and her family, left to bear the anguish. Yet Amber's journey leaves a larger legacy. Her execution is a reflection of American society's struggles with capital punishment, systemic bias, and how marginalized individuals navigate these spaces. Whether viewed as a failure of human rights or a necessary act of justice, her story will not soon be forgotten. As the dust settles, all we are left with are these disturbing questions. When justice collides with identity, who bears the burden of accountability? And at what cost does a society seek closure? In this case, as in so many others, the answers remain murky and elusive.